coalition is preserving your life story for history. Why don't we start by having you introduce yourself?
I'm Pastor Guice, the pastor of the Bethel Missionary Baptist Church of Oakland, California, and I've been pastoring 52 years for the same congregation.
Could you tell us your age and where you were born?
I am 88 years young, and I was born in Reynoldsville, Oklahoma, and reared in Kansas City, Missouri.
How long did you live at your place of birth and then move to Kansas City?
I lived in Reynoldsville, Oklahoma for 8 years, and the family moved to Kansas City, Missouri. And I was there in Kansas City, Missouri until I came to California in 1942.
Tell us a little bit about the Kansas City, Missouri experience.
I attended the Addicts Elementary School and Lincoln High School and the Western Baptist Seminary Theological Seminary.
Was there anything else in Kansas City, Missouri that you enjoyed?
Well, if you want to include 18th and Vine, that was my place until the Lord changed my life.
18th and Vine, tell us about what you're saying.
Oh, it is the center of nightclubs and all of the good times. I think we have a song now that's a motto, or the song that Kansas City uses now. I'm going to Kansas City, the 18th and Vine, and that was my place of hangout until the Lord changed me and converted me and took all of that away from me. I did not start preaching in Kansas City. I started preaching here in Oakland, California in 1943.
Tell us about your family, your brother, your family.
You don't want this?
Just did you have a brother or a sister?
Yes. I was reared by a single parent. My mother reared both of us by herself, and my father did not own me. And I am actually a cooksie, but I took my mother's husband named Guice. Now my brother is named also Guice. That was his father, and we are stepbrothers. And my brother's father deserted my mother before he was born. Therefore, mother had to rear my brother and I on $1 a day, washing and ironing. And by the grace of God, we made it. And
he was your half-brother? Your
half-brother. He's my half-brother. Mm-hmm. But mother never accepted welfare and taught us never to beg or borrow. Always work. And I've worked all of my life. Some kind of job since I was 9 years old. Carrying papers or delivering groceries or delivering drugstore merchandise. And at the age of 18, I saw the terrific strain that was on my mother, and working every day through all kinds of weather. And in Kansas City, Missouri, winter was really winter Sometimes snow would be 3 and 4 feet deep, and I'd see my mother going to work, trying to support my brother and I. And I just couldn't take it. And I dropped out of school at an early age, high school. And I did go to Western Baptist Seminary at night. And all of my education I've gotten through night school and extension school.
And then in 1942, you came to California?
To California.
You stopped in Salt Lake, or?
I came to work in the shipyard, Kaiser Shipyard #1 in Richmond, California. And I continued my night school and extension schooling.
Extension was back in Kansas City?
No, extension school here.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
And in Richmond, tell us about that experience in Richmond. You came here.
I came to Richmond not knowing anybody, not even knowing where I was going to sleep. And I didn't know anybody that knew anybody, but God worked in a mysterious way. And when I got here on the train at 3 o'clock midnight during the war, it was during the war, and the blackout and raining, and there were 7 of us, and there was 1 cab, and the cab would only take 5 people. And that meant there was a white man and myself standing outside, blackout in the rain. And when a cab driver came by and said, "I just felt a hunch to come by. I'm not supposed to be by here." And but as the Lord was working, and he asked me where did I want to go. I said, "I don't know. I don't know anybody or any place." So he said that I would advise you then that I would take you to the mall where the trains turn around and are repaired. And there's a restaurant there, and you can stay there until morning, and maybe you can find a way around somebody. And I did. And the next morning, I saw one of the porters that I had a conversation with on the way here that lived in Kansas City. And he said that I'll try to help you all I can. And the lady that I stop with when I'm here, she's very familiar with the black population, and she maybe can help you. And Sill's restaurant that was very popular at that time, and we had breakfast and left my personal effect there at Sill's and went to Richmond and signed up for a job and came back, and I called the man that said he would help me, and the landlady, she called around different friends, and she got one of her friends to say that she would give me a place to stay for 3 weeks. And she and her family accepted me as a part of their family. And she said, "You can stay here as long as you wish." But the Lord blessed me that there was building project housings in Richmond, and Kaiser Shipyard got me a project accommodation in Richmond, and I sent and got my wife. And when the shipyards closed down, I got a job at the Naval Supply Center in Oakland, the Naval Supply Center in Oakland. And then I started preaching at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in 1943.
In Richmond?
In Oakland.
In Oakland.
While I was living in Oakland, I joined the Mount Zion in 12th and Willow. And I started preaching in the Mount Zion Baptist Church, and then I moved my membership to the St. John Baptist Church in Richmond, and where I was ordained. And when the shipyard closed down, then I moved to Oakland.
About what year was that?
In 46. And I joined the Bible Fellowship Baptist Church, Dr. O.P. Smith, the pastor, and he selected me as his assistant pastor. And while the assistant pastor, he assigned me to be the pastor of a junior church. And he had an anniversary for me, never known in the history of Black Baptists for a pastor to give the assistant pastor an anniversary.
After your first year?
In my first year. And he invited the Estuary Community Church of Alameda. The Reverend R.D. Garrison was the pastor. And they came and was a guest for my anniversary as assistant pastor. And about 6 months later, the Reverend Garrison resigned, and the congregation had a desire for me to be their pastor. But as much as they were a non-denominational church, and I was a Baptist preacher, I refused to accept. And the church was, at that time, the Alameda Estuary Community non-denominational church was under the Alameda Council of Churches. And so they asked why I did not want to accept the church when there was dozens of others. And I told them that the church had no future, and that I wanted to pastor a church that has some future. And so they said, if you take this congregation and pastor it for 3 years, we'll see that you will have a Black Baptist church in Alameda. Alameda had a population of 68,000 people, but no Black Baptist church had ever been, no kind of denomination of people of color was organized in Alameda. And they said, we'll see that you will have an organized Baptist church in Alameda.
About how many black people lived in Alameda?
There was, before the war, there were 68,000 and only 5 black families. And they were very discriminatory.
That was 1945?
That's 1942.
5 families.
Before the war, only 5 families. And Reverend Richard organized the community, non-denominational church, and he pastored for 2 years. Then Reverend Garrison succeeded him and pastored for 2 years. And then I succeeded Reverend Garrison, but all under the non-denominational Esquire Community Church. And they gave me the promise of, if I pastored for 3 years, they would grant me the privilege to organize a denominational church in Alameda. They were satisfied with my work. They fulfilled their promise, and as a result, we dissolved the estuary community, the non-denominational church, and organized the Bethel Baptist Church in 1953, the first and the only denominational church of color in the history of Alameda. So we have made history by being the first and the only Afro-American church to be organized in the city of Alameda. The official title of our church is the Bethel Missionary Baptist Church of Alameda Incorporated. And that brings us up to date as how the church got started.
So up to date, right at the present time, your church came to its present location about when? When was that?
1960.
We're going to come to those later. We have a few more things to talk about.
Oh, okay.
So tell us about it.
We started with less than 50 adults. Our weekly income was $25 a week. And when we organized, we did not have a treasurer because we didn't have any money to put in a treasury. And after a year, we started a building fund. That is 1954. And the Lord laid it on my heart to build from the ground, which no Afro-American church in Oakland had been built from the ground. And in 1958, we got a loan from the Transbay Federal Loan and Saving, which was an all-black bank at that time. And they promised us the loan. There was the site that the church is on now was a lumber yard originally. And this site that the school is on now was also a lumber yard. Lucky Store built in 1959. And we started building in what did I say, Lucky Store building when?
59.
59. Mm-hmm. Then we started building in 1959. And we completed the building in 1960. And on my birthday, August the 7th, 1960, the congregation moved to our new building. And we had a 20-year loan on the church, but God blessed us to pay off the loan of, at that time, of over $1 million, and that was a lot of money at that time, to pay it off in 10 years. And now the church has been debt-free since 1960.
In Alameda, you did some other trailblazing work with the NAACP. Tell us about that.
This was the time when Mrs. Pittman
Taria Hall Pittman
was the regional director, and I told her about my idea of wanting to organize a branch in Alameda, and she gave me 100% support. And we organized, I can't remember this exactly, but when we had organized, there were no blacks in the offices. None.
in the stores and at the
Alameda
Alameda.
Naval Air Station. And there were over 8,000 employees. And the only Afro-American was in the offices. There were hundreds and hundreds of employees in the office positions. But the only Afro-American in there was mail delivery girls. And I asked Mr. Lingerie, who was the head of the personnel, to take me on a tour of the station, Naval Air Station of Alameda. And he was very kind. And he showed me all of the place where a lot of Afro-Americans were working. And then said, how did you like what you saw? I said, fine. The only thing, I didn't see any of the office buildings. He said, well, I'll be fair with you. You won't like what you see. I said, but let me see it. And every office building he took me to, there was not a single Afro-American. And I asked him why. And he said, well, the white women do not like to use the same restroom like the black women use. I said, well, whose job is it, the white women or the government? He said, well, the government. I said, then let's follow the government's guidelines. He said, well, will you give me 2 months? I have to go with the heads of every department and tell them that they're going to have to change. But I'll tell you what you do. I'll hire anybody you send. I said, no. I want you to hire them like you hire everybody else. He said, and then after 2 months, he told me, you send, I will hire. I said, no, you hire them on the same level. And this was the beginning of Afro-American working at the Naval Air Station of Alameda, California.
And that was what year was that?
That had to be in the, around about 55 or 6, something like that.
And did you do any other things with the NAACP after that?
My work was getting heavy, and I let Mr. Carter Gilmore, I asked them to accept him as the president while I went about doing elder work in the civic affairs.
So living in the Bay Area, tell us about that. How about your living in the Bay Area? Has that been a plus or a minus as opposed to living back in, let's say, Oklahoma or in Kansas City, Missouri?
I was only 8 years old. I didn't know much about Oklahoma. It has been a plus because I started preaching in 43. That was a year after I moved here. And in my ministry, it gave me an opportunity to work in many phases of civic as well as religious affairs. And I was working with the NAACP and with the Boy Scouts and with the city. I was 12 years with the Oakland Housing Board of Commissioners, and this is where I think I did my greatest work in getting housing for our people, Afro-Americans.
And you continue that through your church?
Pastoring and yes, yes, that's the reason of saying I gave up because with the NAACP, so I could, and with the housing, Mr. John B. Williams was executive director at that time, and we worked close together. And with the Board of Commissioners, with the housing, Miss Hewlett, she was the chairperson of that division.
So a lot of your members of your congregation were able to get homes?
I work for the public.
For the public.
Well, to the public. And I had them to change the policy of amount of interest. They had a sliding rule. They could slide the rule from 0 to 7%. And I saw that majority of the whites and Spanish surnames were getting 3% interest. And one particular case, there was a single parent. She had 4 children and working, and they wanted to charge her 7%. Well, there was a Spanish surname man, had been working on a job, had 3 boys, and they were working, and the wife, and he got a 3%. And I said, no. And I contested it to the extent that they did away with the sliding rule and the maximum 0 to 3%. And the elderly people, I was instrumental in getting them a $5,000 grant. And everyone at that time got a 17.5% deferred loan. And this is where we helped a lot of folks, black folks, in getting a 17.5% deferred loan, which means that as long as that person or an heir to that person lived in the house, they would not have to pay 1 nickel.
So they would pay at some point?
Only they have to pay if it was sold. If changed name, they would have to pay, but otherwise they would not have to pay.
In your church and over the years, you've had a connection with education and working with the Oakland Unified School District, and I believe one of the superintendents was in your church. Tell us about some of the educational work that you have fostered.
We were the first to start a scholarship program where we started, in fact, with $100 to one student. And from that $100, we have given over $1 million in scholarship. And the only requirement is that the student would be accepted to a higher level school, from high school to college, even with a C. If they accept it, they'll get some money. Because I believe, well, in fact, Miss Edna Washington, who at one time was the superintendent of school, she organized our scholarship program. And she suggested that we give us, she said, a C. If they accept it, that child needs some money worse than the A and B. They will get scholarships, but that C will not. They need it worse than anyone. And so we have funds for the A and the B student, but that child, if he's accepted to our School of Higher Learning, he'll get some money. Especially those who are from poor families and single parent families.
Superintendent Edna Washington also indicated something about elementary children and the need for education that inspired you to
build this school.
Tell us about that.
She made the statement that students do not drop out in the junior high and high school. They do not drop out. They began dropping out in elementary school, because in elementary school they get the basics, the old reading and writing and arithmetic. And if they do not get that in elementary school, then they will begin dropping out. Because if they cannot keep up in elementary school, they cannot catch up in the higher school, the higher school. So they began dropping out in elementary, and they try to catch up in junior high and high, and because they cannot catch up, they drop out. Then the Lord showed me the vision that if we could fill that void, that vacuum, where the child will get supreme elementary education, plus read the Bible, plus say prayers, plus a religious background. We teach the Bible here, plus Spanish, plus English. And our children, we have them reading newspapers in the second grade.
I see you have some photographs, and I believe that is a picture of the school over there. Could we start with, here, tell us about the photographs of your school?
Yes, this was originally a lumber yard, what we own right now. And then Lucky built a store. And then Inby bought Lucky out. And we bought Inby's. And when we were planning the construction of the building, the question came up in the planning committee, where will we locate the school? Should it be in the back of the church or where? And one of the members of the planning committee, Brother Jimmy Hawthorne, suggested that we tear the store down and build the school here, where we'd have high visibility. And we could build what we want. The Lord gave me the vision of the school, the structure. And you can't see it, but there's a glass dome on the top. You can see it as you go out there. And we are the only church I know in California that is built from the ground, an educational an academy.
And this is for kindergarten through the...
Pre-K through 6.
All right, and you have some other photographs?
And we had our first graduates just a few weeks ago.
The first graduates.
The first
Yes,
graduates.
Outstanding. And then I'd like you to show us your other photographs and tell us about them, starting.
Huh?
Have it ready to go, the next one. Have your next photo ready to go.
Tell us about your photographs.
The top photograph was taken when I was 4 years old. And the lower one is my mother sitting, my brother's leaning on her, and I'm sitting on a desk. I was about 9 years old, and he was 5.
That was in Oklahoma?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes.
I was 9. We left Oklahoma
Okay. Then
when I was 8.
And do you have any other photographs?
And this photograph shows that I haven't been bald all my life. This was taken when I was 21, on my birthday at the age of 21.
Looks like Duke Ellington.
I had some hair too.
Okay, you're next.
And which I don't have in this one. That was taken on our 29th anniversary of the scholarship program.
Okay. And then your next one?
And this is where we worship. That was in Alameda, and that is the size of the congregation. And our offering at that time was had grown to about $100 a week. and that is a wing of the Alameda Housing Authority's administrative building in Alameda, California.
There was a lot of African Americans that lived in Alameda.
A lot, there was thousands who lived in there, but in as much as we were in the projects, we had the nickname of being the old project church, and folks, they didn't want to go be labeled as belonging to that old project church. So they would come to the big churches in Oakland and Berkeley, and didn't want to be identified with the project church.
And then you have
And that old project church, God gave me the vision to build a church from the ground. And beginning at $25 a week originally, the Lord gave me the vision to build the church, and this is the exterior of what was, well, an old project church, to the first Afro-American church built from the ground in the East Bay area. And this is the exterior, and here we have the interior of what that little project church grew from, and the church seats between 1,500 and 2,000 people. And you see it's filled to its capacity.
Yeah, so we see the choir and the congregation.
Here's the choir here and the congregation, and here's the balcony up here.
Well, the coalition is so proud to honor you as one of the historians in the program Eternal Voices of June 2002. And I understand that your summer academy for the Dr. Herbert Guice Christian Academy will have summer school here in this facility. Could
Yes.
you just tell us about that, and as we wrap up today?
Well, we will begin our school year at the same time as the public school. And we have great plans for the future. Can you cut it off? Just a second, please. This year we have blessed to have as our director for the academy the Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Benford. He is a graduate of the Morehouse College of Atlanta, Georgia, and he brings with him high academic achievements, as well as he is a minister of the gospel. So we're fortunate to have in our academy the tops in both fields, religious and educational.
Once again, we must thank you for this honor for Eternal Voices for June of 2002. Reverend Dr. Herbert Guice. Thank you.
I feel that it is an honor. Thank you very much for selecting me. Thank you. Thank you. Amen.